Okay, so how would you, we're starting off with a question, and don't open your books yet, okay? I'll let you know when to open your books. How would you describe your role as a Jewish woman? If anyone wants to shout it out or put it in a chat, in a short, not in long sentences, but just in anything really short, quick, one word or a phrase.
Teach the children.
Huh? Teach the children?
Teach the children.
Okay, that's a good one.
Matriarch.
Matriarch, okay.
Show kindness.
Okay, that's nice. That's good. Okay, very good. Okay. We'll start off. There's different mitzvahs that apply in different situations, right? So you have like time, different mitzvahs that have to do with a specific time of year, like a holiday or a certain season of the year. There's mitzvahs that have to do with different locations, like are you in the land of Israel? Are you in a walled city, right? There's different nuances of mitzvahs that have to do with, different places. There's mitzvahs that are connected to different people, right? There's mitzvahs that men do, there's mitzvahs that women do, there's mitzvahs that only a Kohen does. And then there's mitzvahs for different eras, right? There are mitzvahs that we did in the times of the Beis HaMikdash and times when the Holy Temple stood. There are mitzvahs that we do that are, different when we don't have the Beis HaMikdash. And actually today, you know how many mitzvahs we could actually fulfill living not in the times of the Holy Temple, not in, in our day and age. There's only 270 mitzvahs that can be fulfilled. And of those, there's some of those that only could be fulfilled in the land of Israel. And then there's mitzvahs that are not obligated by women because they're time-bound positive mitzvahs. So all in all, when you think there's 613 mitzvahs altogether, but really there's not even, it's, maybe a third of that we could actually fulfill in our day and age and as being a woman. So it's very, very interesting thought. So let's go back for a minute to Abraham and Sarah, Avram and Sarah, the first Jewish couple. As many of you know, there was a special blessing that they had in their tent, and that is that the candles stayed lit from week to week. The bread was fresh and good from week to week, and there was a cloud that that hovered over their tent. And when Sarah passed away, what happened? All these three special, like miracles or special things disappeared. Even though Avram was a tzaddik, right? He was a great, great person. He was our forefather, the first of the forefathers, the first Jew. And yet, even someone like Avram, he cannot bring these blessings into his home. Only Sarah did. And then when Yitzchak got married to Rivka, it says that he brought her into the tent, he loved her, and he was comforted for the loss of his mother. And when she moved in, these three blessings came back into their home. So we see these blessings were special, especially only brought about by women. And these three blessings actually connect to the three mitzvahs that are special for women. That ones that the women are primarily responsible for. And I know many of you know that, but we're going to just go through them a little bit. So it's because the woman, she sets the tone of the home, and the woman is the one that imbues the spiritual energy in the home or the environment. Like it says, if the mom's not happy, nobody's happy. And it's a feminine ability to uncover the light and to bring out the brightness and the light and the good in the environment. So the Shabbos candles mark the end of the work week, and it ushers in the Shabbos. It brings peace, it brings sanctity, it brings physical light, but it also brings a spiritual light into the dark world. There's actually a time when someone wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and they said, it's not our custom for girls to light candles, only once we get married. And the Rebbe said, well, back in the days of your grandparents, when the girls didn't light candles, they also didn't read, didn't have magazines and books out that they read that are around today. And some of the darkness that's in those things and the not holiness that is in there needs to be combated with the light of the Shabbos candles. And that's why we need younger girls today to light Shabbos candles. the mitzvah of Taharas HaMishpacha, family purity, shows that our body could be holy, and our bodily pleasures could be channeled in a good way. So in the old days, there were many laws of Tuma and Tara, which are loosely translated as purity and impurity and purity, which is not correct word. It's more like a spiritual purity and impurity. And it was a normal part of life, especially for the Kohen, for the people who worked in the Beis Hamikdash. And if in different level, in different parts of their purification process, people wore different clothing, where you were allowed to be, depending on your purity or impurity status, what you can eat, especially the Kohen, what he was allowed to eat, if he was allowed to eat in part in the stuff in the Beis Hamikdash, if you're even allowed to eat certain things in Jerusalem. And for non-Kohen people, people who didn't work in the Beis Hamikdash, also there was laws of purity and impurity. One of the most common ones or known ones is people, like it's called tamei lameis, meaning that if someone was in contact with a dead body, that they had a certain spiritual impurity that they had to purify themselves. Other ones were just insect being, like in your vessels, or a non-kosher carcass of an animal, or different things like that. And when the Kohen would eat in the Beis Hamikdash, there was the 12, the showbreads, the lechem hapanim, and he had to wash his hand at the special key, at the special wash basin that was there at the entrance of the Beis Hamikdash. Today, there is no Beis Hamikdash. There is, and the rabbis wanted to keep this idea of washing our hands for purification processes, just like the Kohen did for the bread that they ate in the Beis Hamikdash. And we have the idea of washing our hands for bread, which we'll discuss soon. Now, the laws of family purity are one of the few laws of purity and impurity that we actually have today and keep today. And then the other thing we want to discuss is, okay, so what's it? The Kohen, so, we said he worked in the Beis Hamikdash, he worked in the Holy Temple, and they can only be people who are descendants of Aaron, of Moshe's brother, and they did not have a portion in the land in Israel. Why? Because they were like public servants. Their life was dedicated to serving Hashem and serving the people, helping the people serve Hashem. And so they were also, besides for the work that they did in the Beis Hamikdash, actual sacrifices and bringing the offerings, and keeping the place clean and sparkling and making sure everything was there in the Beis Hamikdash. And think about who does that in a home usually, making sure we have all the supplies and making sure that everything is all set and the food is ready and everything's all done right. This was the Kohen's job. And so their pay, they didn't have a field, they didn't have land that they were able to like grow things on, which all the other people did in the land of Israel. So their pay was through tithes, through gifts that the people gave to them, or when they gave sacrifices for Hashem, they would eat parts of it, and was very specific. So one of these gifts was the dough. When a person made a big dough, they had to portion off a piece and give it to the Kohen, and that way the Kohen had some dough. They can make their own bread. If it wasn't, they would only eat the showbread in the Beis Hamikdash if it was their turn to serve. If it wasn't their turn to serve, they got different tithes, as I said, and different gifts from the people. And one of them was that anytime you had you were making a dough, you had to give off a piece and give it to the Kohen. So today,
can I ask a question real quick? I mean, the Kohanim, they were also married, right? So how did they support and feed and house and clothe their kids?
Through these different tithes, through these different gifts. So there was different requirements. And I think in a 7-year cycle, there was like, each person had to give a certain amount every certain amount of like years. And then let's say something like this, anytime they had the dough, some was given to the Kohen. Anytime you had to give the Kohen like kind of like taxes. That's where the taxes went. Some went to the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash and for communal sacrifices, and some went to the Kohen and some went to the Levi. And also they would also teach the people. So could be people gave them, for that too.
So they'd give them money or they would just give them the food?
Money, depending what. Yes, there were all different ones. It was money. So that's Meiser, the tithing.
Meiser,
A tenth
okay.
of your money. It had to, yeah. Then there was like when there were sacrifices, if it was your, week or weeks of serving in the Beis Hamikdash, your family would eat parts of those. Then there were like questions if let's say you have a daughter that was married and now is divorced, is she considered part of your family? Does she eat those sacrifices? Or does she eat, or she not eat? Because is she considered part of the Cohen family? Is she considered not part of the Cohen family? There are many different legal intricacies of who's allowed to partake in the offerings and in these things and where you ate it and nothing like that. So yeah, so that's how they survived, the Cohen. So they couldn't just go into business, like, have their fields and sell, their produce. They had to survive just by, from the taxes of the people. Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Sure. So once the Holy Temple, once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, some of these different things we keep up, or we do or we don't do, or do in a different way. So one of those things was that they the idea of separating the challah. Today we still do it because the mitzvah is to do it wherever you live. You don't have to live in the land of Israel to do it. And since this dough is consecrated, it's holy, we can't just, but the Kohen's not considered tahor, not considered pure anymore. He can't have it and we can't have it, so we end up burning it. We'll discuss that in a minute. That's what we do with the dough. In Israel, in the land of Israel, they still have the idea of trumos and meisros, which is gifts and tithes. When they have like fruits or vegetables, when they have produce, they have either they take it off before they bring it to the store, or when you're eating, before you eat it in your home, you have to take it off. And also that can't go to anyone. It can't be done with anything. It just goes to, like, they have a special kind of like a garbage can, and that it just spoils in there because it's considered holy. So there are certain parts of it, but that's only in Israel. Out of Israel, those laws aren't supposed to be kept. So but the dough is one that does, and that's why today we still take off a piece of our dough.
And what do we do with it?
The dough, we burn it because it can't be used.
You have to burn it.
You have to burn it, yeah.
And how much do you take?
There's a small piece. It says a kazayas, which is like a portion, like one serving, or like the size of an egg, about.
Okay.
Okay. So as I said before, today we wash our hands when we eat bread, and we'll discuss that soon. Okay. I just wanted to also share a story about a couple, a very simple couple that lived back in, I'm not sure exactly where. Oh, I know, lived at the times of the Arizal, the famous Kabbalist. And so that was back, I think, about the 1600s. And they were very simple. They weren't very learned. And the husband was listening to a class given by the rabbi in the shul, and the rabbi says how in the how in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, the people would that you would give gifts to the Beis Hamikdash, and it was for Hashem. And he thought it was such a beautiful idea. He said, "Wow, you're able to give a piece of your dough to Hashem, and you're able to give, you brought sacrifices for Hashem." And he came home and told his wife, "You know what? I learned in how we can, reciprocate to Hashem and give to Hashem, and the class that the rabbi gave. And I just was thinking about it. I was thinking that maybe every week you could, when you break your challah, bake an extra challah and bring it. I'll bring it to the shul. I'll put it in the most holy place in the shul, which is where the Aron Kodesh, the holy ark, where the Torahs are kept, and we'll give a gift to Hashem. And that will be like, we want to thank God. We're so grateful for everything that He gives us. This will be like something that we can do for Him." And the wife said, "Wow, that's a great idea." So that Thursday night, she baked her bread, she baked her challah, and in the morning, early in the morning, before anyone else was in shul, the man took the fresh challah loaf and put it inside the holy ark, closed it up, and went on with his business, and nobody knew. And the next week again, his wife made the bread, made the challah, and he came and he opened the holy ark, and the bread for the week before wasn't there. Said, "Wow, Hashem took our bread. Hashem took our challah. Wow, that's beautiful." And so he put the new fresh challah there, and this went on every week. Meanwhile, the shamash of the shul, the one who took care of the shul, he was cleaning up for Shabbos, before Shabbos, and he smelled something really good coming out of the ark, and he opens it up, he's like, "God, please help me. My wife and I, we don't have enough money. Can you help us with our provisions for Shabbos?" And he smells the smell, and he opens up the ark, and he sees a delicious challah sitting there, and he said, "Whoa, thank you, Hashem. Didn't know it was going to come so easily." And he takes the challah and he brings it home to his wife. Says, "Wife, look, Hashem answered my prayers." And then the next week, the same thing happens. And the next week, the same thing happens. And everything's going nice and well until one week, someone decides to ruin it. One week, the rabbi happens to be in shul really early in the morning, and he's sitting in his corner, and he hears someone playing around near the ark and saying something, "Hashem, please accept our gift to you." And he's like, "What?" And he goes, "What's going on over here?" And the man says, "Oh, I'm bringing my weekly gift to Hashem of fresh challah." And the rabbi says, "What are you talking about? Hashem can't take your challah. What's this all about? You can't leave challah with the Torahs. That's not nice. That's really, disgraceful to the Torahs for you to do that." And the man said, but I've been doing it every week, and it's been so, and God's been taking it every week from us. And the rabbi said, "God can't be taking it." And meanwhile, the shamash, the caretaker, comes in, and he hears what's going on. He says, "Oh, that's where my challah is coming from. Thank you so much for providing us with challah every week." And the rabbi's like, "This is crazy. What's going on here? You can't be giving God gifts of challah every week. How could you do that? It's not the right thing. You better not do that again. That was in the old days when we had the Beis Hamikdash. We were able to do that, and not anymore." And the man felt all sad and bad, and he went home. He told his wife, "I don't think the rabbi likes our idea." And now the shamash, they didn't either have his bread. Now, meanwhile, somehow, through heavenly things were, the Arizal, who was a famous Kabbalist, he heard about the story, and he saw that something in heaven was going on all because of it.
Oh.
And he actually sent messengers to this town and to the rabbi, and he said, "You know that you caused. You're not going to live to the end of the year, because you caused great problems in heaven. Since the time of the Holy Temple, God has not had such a wonderful pleasure, like till this point where these people were coming with such sincerity and bringing their challah every week for him. Now, obviously, Hashem can't really take it, but just their sincerity and their earnestness, and you stopped it, and you caused Hashem to not have this pleasure anymore. So God is going to be punishing you."
Oh.
And the rabbi said, "Please, can I do something to fix that? I'm so sorry." And I guess they wrote back and forth to the Ari, and they said, "Okay, if you make sure to take care of this couple, take them under your wing, teach them how to, serve Hashem properly, even though, they were doing it sincerely, but help them and teach them how to do things, and Hashem will forgive you." And that is a very interesting story, about bringing gifts to Hashem and bringing, and what the idea was, and just about today in our own sincerity. Sometimes when someone does something in a sincere way, it makes a big difference. So before you open your books, I don't want to open their books yet. I want you now, our class is all about bread, and I want you to think of any phrases or words that have to do with bread, but mean something. For example, like if someone says, "Oh, I have a lot of dough," right? It means you got a lot of money, right? Does anyone have any other interesting phrases with the word bread or something to do with bread. Anyone think of any? And if you want a hint, you can open up to figure 4.1, which is page 76.
So sad I left my book at home.
Oh, okay.
I only associate bread with money because they say he's got a lot of dough,
There you go. Yeah. What else?
and bread is also referred to as money.
Right.
I can't think of anything else. That it's referred
Anyone
to.
find another one?
Well, his breadwinner,
Breadwinner, right? The person
Well, that's
who
money.
makes the money, exactly. What else? Put bread on the table means like you're earning a good living. Okay, Anthony's trying to unmute herself.
bread basket, an especially productive region that provides food to a country.
Mm-hmm.
The bread, I like the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, the best they see. So
That's a good one.
yeah, the bread and butter of something, right?
Yeah.
That's what sometimes bread and
That's the
circus.
basics.
There's so many different connotations of bread that have to do that, and bread always shows, making a living, money, all connected to that. So why is that? Isn't that an interesting thing? Why is bread so connected to that? Why is bread just kind of special place in our lives? And if you have bread, it means you are surviving. And if you don't have bread, it means you're not surviving, right?
Sustenance.
Sustenance, right. Okay. So we're going to watch a little video about, actually, probably watch a little video about bread. So bread is the mainstay of our diet, and it's the single largest component of human nourishment. So, right, sometimes bread makes you feel full, even though, like, your diet may tell you don't eat so much bread, but you eat that bread and it makes you feel like complete and full, and I feel like I ate something. Or people like, a sandwich is a very basic staple and common thing people eat, a sandwich with something, right? Somehow the bread is always like so important part of it.
And it's delicious.
Of course.
Especially the
Let's-
collard.
Yes, let's watch a little bit about bread.
One thing common to all humanity for millennia is our universal pursuit of bread. In circumstances of poverty and want, bread was, and in some places still is, the only food to eat. But a closer look at this satiating staple of survival reveals a food as remarkably diverse as humanity itself. Human reliance on bread might suggest that it is easier to produce than other foods. But bread does not fall off trees like ripe mangoes. It cannot be milked from a bovine. It won't be fished out of a river or collected from a hen's nest. Unlike these ready-made options, almost a dozen steps are needed to produce a loaf of bread. Not easy steps either. Bread making involves substantial time, effort, and ingenuity, and its pursuit precipitated the creation of numerous instruments and other inventions. In Judaism, bread making gained an extra degree of scrutiny as a result of the Torah's ban on performing labor on Shabbat. In this context, labor is defined as one of 39 creative actions, 11 of which are the steps that the ancient sages labeled the bread-making process. 1. Plowing. Bread comes from grain that sprouts from the soil. To prepare soil for planting, it is cleared, leveled, and broken up, sometimes more than once. For this purpose, the plow was invented some 5 millennia ago. 2. Sowing. Seeds are spread evenly in furrows and then buried within the soil. It takes several months for grain to grow. Meanwhile, the earth is irrigated where possible, and farmers pray hard for rain where irrigation is not possible. And the earth is fertilized, weeded, and guarded from hungry critters and creatures. 3. Reaping. Once the stalks are fully grown and ripened, they require harvesting. For this laborious task, tools such as the sickle and the scythe were invented. 4. Binding sheaves. Cut wheat is gathered into bundles or sheaves and left to dry in the open field or in a drying shed for several weeks. 5. Threshing. Grain stalks contain edible kernels and indigestible chaff. The two must be forced apart. Before the advent of machinery, stalks were spread on a threshing floor and pounded with frails, trampled by animals, or crushed with heavy stone or wood hand rollers. 6. Winnowing. Once kernels and chaff have been forced apart, they must be separated. The mixture is tossed into the wind. The lighter chaff is blown like dust to one side, while the heavier kernels fall back down and are caught in a basket. 7. Selecting. Smaller chaff fragments and other inedible impurities remain mixed with the grain without a machine. These must be painstakingly removed by hand. 8. Milling. The kernels are ground finely into flour. Animal-powered millstone, steam-powered watermill, and windmills were invented for this purpose. 9. Sifting. Kernels are multi-layered, which gives the flour multiple components. Flour is sifted to separate these elements for the sake of producing bread varieties, whole wheat, white bread, and the like. 10. Kneading. Flour is mixed with water and additional ingredients, if desired, and thoroughly kneaded together. The dough is left to rise to give the breads its uniquely satisfying texture and flavor. Variations in this process account for the staggering diversity of bread types. 11. Baking. This was done over heated stones and the like, until the invention of the oven brought us the full-bodied breads we enjoy today. Satisfying perhaps, but for most of history, bread making was incredibly time-consuming and multiple labor demanding. And despite the huge investment of land, seed, labor, and patience, success was far from guaranteed. Weather, be it drought, sandy blasts, withheld rains, excessive rainfall, flooding, excessive chill or heat, or wildfire could ruin it all, leaving a farmer with nary a crumb. Even with today's incredible farming machinery and other technologies that feed into industrial bakeries at a pace once unimaginable, a single loaf remains a complex process that requires each of these 11 steps. Which leaves us wondering, why have humans consistently insisted on investing so much time and difficult labor into gaining slices of this grain-based nourishment?
Well, yeah, good question. Right? Why go through all that
Mhm.
to get our bread? Why is bread so important? So a bread represents food that, oh, so actually, before I start, there's actually this woman, she's a little bit crazy, this religious woman, and she goes and visits she's like a adventurer and traveler, and she goes to different places around the world just, to visit and to like learn. Like she just is fascinated by, different people's cultures and stuff. And she doesn't go to places like Hawaii and the Caribbean, but she goes to like cheap, quote unquote, countries where it's easy to, where it's cheap to get around, cheap to stay and stuff like that. And she right now is already like about 6-7 weeks in Ghana. And they actually, she went to the small little villages, and the people there are still living like, a few hundred years ago. And she has videos, like she's standing there while they're sitting and making cornmeal from corn, like, literally grinding it by hand, with a little, what's it called? Pestle, right? And,
Mortar and
mortar and pestle, thank you. Yes. So very interesting. People still today do that. And like, these little villages still doing it all by hand. So, and as you saw, that these are like, that we learn from all these things, what you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, the 39 labors of Shabbos, like you saw, like the separating and, a lot of binding. So like a lot of these things are why we don't do certain things on Shabbos, is all the process of the stuff, and part of it is of making bread. So bread represents food and all human need. Bread also, what's interesting is it marks the beginning of civilization. I mean, today we just go to the store and buy some bread, or buy some flour and make bread, but you already have, 9 out of the 11 steps done, even if you're making your own bread. But think back in the day that our ancestors had to clear a field, they had to plow, plant, pray for rain, harvest it, thresh it, mill it, knead it, bake it, all these different things. So as we saw in the video, isn't it easier just to like pluck some fruit from the tree or try to hunt down an animal, and just have it right there? But the thing is that bread whoops, is something that can be grown in large quantities and it can be stored for a long time. Let's say someone went and hunted an animal to eat. How long could that animal stay fresh before it goes bad, right? It had to be eaten pretty quickly. Maybe they were able to dry some of the meat, but like not a huge animal. Or, you picked a fruit or something from the tree or a vegetable from the tree, from the bush. How long did that last? It couldn't sit for, potatoes maybe could last for a few months, but like most of the stuff are stuff that, it's more of like, you go and you kind of like, the hunters and the gatherers, right? They didn't really stay in one place, but civilization, the idea of sitting and making bread, even though it was a huge task, they're able to make a lot, right? A lot of flour and have that flour for a long time. So meaning they're able to settle down, they're able to stay in one place. They didn't have to be every day running and hunting and moving from place to place. So it gave that idea that once they had fields and they're able to plant wheat and able to make bread, they were able to then go on to build infrastructure and create education and commerce and kind of create cities. It was kind of the beginning of human civilization, was when they started to plant grain to make bread. There's also a deeper significance to bread, and that is there are many mitzvahs that are specially connected to bread, as we mentioned a little bit before about like washing the hands and stuff, which we'll discuss a little more soon. There's also Kabbalah of bread. What's the process of bread making? What does that really mean? What does that mean to our day-to-day life? And we'll discuss that also very soon. So the last month's lesson, we discussed brachas, we discussed blessings, right? Before and after you eat. The blessings acknowledge Hashem as the source of our sustenance. And the blessing for bread was hamotzi, right? Once you make the hamotzi bracha, it encompasses all the other food on the table. You don't need to sit and make a bracha on every food once you make that bracha, once you make the hamotzi, because hamotzi shows that you're having a proper meal. You're sitting down to eat bread. It means you're having a proper meal. And that bracha, that blessing covers all the other things that you're eating. That's the mainstay of the meal. And the same thing we learned last lesson about the birchas hamazon, the benching, the after blessing, is that if you wash for bread, then you say the after blessing, you don't have to say those little blessings for the snacks, because that blessing encompasses it all. Okay. Okay. So question is, we all have the word challah. What does challah really mean? Is challah, look at page 78, I think. Is it a loaf of bread? Is it the braided bread that we use for Shabbos, that, what we're used to? Is it a small piece of dough that's set aside and burned when making the bread that we discussed before, that we give to the Kohen? Or is it D, all of the above?
All of the above.
All of the above, Shelley says. Anyone have any other answer?
But I would add to it, because I look at challah as being like a holy thing.
Mhm.
Let's
So
see.
the making of it and the eating of it and the blessing of it, I see it as a holy thing.
Okay. And Chanarach, you say C, it's the piece of dough that's set aside when making bread.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just catching up on all of these things. Okay, good. So yes, it's all of the above, and yes, the origin of challah is from number C. So the origin is separating that piece of dough and giving it to the Kohen, and that's where it's called a piece of challah. And then challah became the bread that we eat on Shabbos, and any loaf of bread, and so it just became the way of bread. Okay.
But I have a question again. What is the actual challah mean again?
So the original meaning, because it says, we're going to read actually now in text 1. I'll read it so you'll hear, and then it says, when you eat the bread of the land, you shall lift up an uplifting to God. The first portion of your kneading bowl, you shall lift up challah as an uplifting. You'll give an uplifting to God in all your generations. And in Hebrew, it says, Reishis arisosech sem challah. That means the first portion of your kneading bowl, you should lift up challah. There we go. Okay, so originally it comes from the piece that you take off of your dough that you're going to give to the Kohen. okay? So what
And
is
you
the,
take.
behind the mitzvah of challah? What is the idea of this? So when someone sits and makes their challah dough, and I make it every week, you put all your energy into preparing your dough, right? Or if someone has a job, you put all your energy into trying to make your dough, right? You're making money, and you put a lot of effort into it and everything. And before you take a piece of your literal challah to, to a piece of your dough to literally to burn for the Kohen to give to Hashem, or before when you're working all day, right? If you stop and think, hey, this is, this really, I should give a portion of this to God. So people give tzedakah, people give a tenth of their earnings or more to tzedakah when they're working. They say, I'm going to give, I'm going to make sure to give some tzedakah from my money or whatever, from my earnings. But the idea is that it instills within us the idea that really everything we do and everything we're doing, we should have God in mind. We shouldn't just say, okay, this is my work. I'm doing whatever I do at work. Don't bother me when I'm at work. When I go to shul and then I'm being religious and then I'll think about God. No, but everything that we do in our life, whatever creativity we do, whatever thing we produce, whatever productivity that we have, we should always think that I'm working for God. I'm doing this for God. And how am I going to incorporate God into whatever it is that I'm doing? So we see this in the actual dough. We take a piece of the dough off and we're giving it for God. And that's like the physical and the tangible. But in whatever else we do, whatever other ways of making our dough or, whatever creativities that we have, or, as I said, whatever things that we do, whatever production that we do, it's the idea that we are try to incorporate God into what we are doing in whatever way, shape, or form. And as we mentioned before, the three mitzvahs of the woman, that the women are the givers, the nurturers, and challah, if you give challah is nourishing to others. And we sanctify this idea. We're going to try to do this in a way of sanctity. So everything that we do, we said, the women transform and bring the light and bring that spiritual energy into it. So this is what we're doing. Everything that we do, and if it's through your work, through your job, through making money, through your artistic things that you do, whatever it is, whatever way you produce, you are trying to transform that and bring out the godliness in whatever it is that you're doing. And we mentioned before about washing our hands, the Tilas Yadayim, that we do before we eat bread. And we said that we do this because it's kind of reminds us that the laws of purity and impurity that the Kohen did in the Beis HaMikdash before he would eat his bread, that he washed his hands in a special way. And so every time we eat, this is even just by eating, we are transforming that meal into something holy by reenacting the observance that they had in the Beis HaMikdash of washing their hands. So we don't have those levels of spirituality today, but today we still wash our hands to kind of remind us of Hashem's presence in the world. The same idea as taking the challah dough, a piece of dough from our big dough, or a piece of challah from our dough to burn. That's because
So that piece that you take when you're taking challah, that piece is called the challah?
That's the original word challah, yes.
And what
But
does the actual word mean, challah?
that's a good question. It means that's what the word meant. It meant that piece that you're separating. Let me just see if it but it doesn't really translate it, but challah became to mean, right, any type of dough. So it meant the consecrated piece of dough that we gave to the Kohen, is what the original
the
challah meant.
consecrated piece of dough. But
Yeah.
does it have a literal mean? Is it like the
It's a good que- I
shortest?
could look it up. But not really.
I'm sorry
so,
for
yeah.
diverting.
It's okay.
But when you're talking about like, the actual, meaning of the challah, and I wanted to, and you were talking about the piece that you separate. So I wanted to know, is that the piece? So now we've
That's really the
established
challah.
that piece that you take, the taking of the challah, that piece, that consecrated piece that you burn,
Right.
like, you would do in the temple, like for offering.
Well, then
that's
they would
called
give it
the
to them. They would
challah.
actually use it to eat. They would bake it and eat it, the Kohen, but now since we
Right,
can't do that today,
right,
we
right.
burn it. So yes, that piece is the original, that's what challah means. But
Right.
today, it just means all kind, right, bread, usually, challah. But we eat on
Right.
Shabbos more or
The
less, but
actual
yeah,
loaf.
or loaf, yeah, okay. So how do we wash our hands from bread? I know many of you know, but we're just gonna go over it. And I think there actually might be, you guys have a figurine about it or not really? Oh yeah, figure 4.2. Okay, so there's a few things that we have to keep in mind when we wash our hands for bread. Number one is that your hands should be fully clean. It's not like, oh, you're cleaning your hands so then you can eat, but if your hands are dirty, you should first wash them and dry them, and then you're gonna wash for bread. And you shouldn't have any rings or intervening substances on your hand. And the water needs to get in contact with every single part of your body. So just,
Of your body or your
sorry,
hand?
of your hand, sorry, of your skin. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm trying to do two
That's,
things at
that's
once.
the mikvah, I think. you
Yeah,
would-
yeah, you're right. Okay, sorry. Here's what tells you that. Okay. So, and then it has to be water. It shouldn't be soapy water or a cleaning agent, but it has to be actually clear water. And you should have enough water, try to fill the cup enough that it will completely cover your hand. Okay. The vessel that you use, I'm just going to catch up. The vessel that you use should be whole and complete and no cracks or holes. I don't think I see this because it's kind of loose site. It should be a smooth top. It shouldn't have a spout or something on it. And it has to have you in action. So you have to use a vessel and not just like stick your hand under the faucet or under running water. Technically, your hand just has to be washed once. So your hand has to be completely washed once, but we do it a second time to make sure, just in case you missed any place the first time, that your hands are fully washed. Chabad has a custom to actually do it 3 times. So 3 times on the right and 3 times on the left to really make sure that your whole hand is fully covered in water. Now, if you look at figure 4.3 on page 80, it says, so basically your hands are washed, your hands are clean, you hold the washing cup in your right hand, you fill it up, you transfer to your left hand. If you're a lefty, you do the opposite of all this. You pour 3 times or 2 times, whatever your custom is, fully, and you kind of turn your hand, making sure that everything from the fingertips until the wrist is covered with water. Then you don't want to get any intervening substances from your washed hand. So many people take a towel or a paper towel before they switch hands. And then with holding the towel or paper towel, holding the cup, they do the same thing to the left hand, wash 3 times, put their hands up together, and they say the bracha, and then they fully wipe their hands dry, and then they go on to say the bracha hamotzi for the bread. And we don't talk between the washing and the hamotzi, because when you're doing one mitzvah and you go to do another mitzvah, you don't want to have like a break and stop and do something else. Okay, you don't want to get stuck on something else in the middle over there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Kabbalah of bread. Okay, so the Kabbalah of bread, we were discussing the whole time about the Beis Hamikdash and the hand washing, and about the Kohanim, what they did in the Beis Hamikdash. We said they made sure it was clean, they prepared the food, right? That they prepared the offerings, they made the bread, they made sure the supplies were there, and it sounds very similar to what a homemaker does. Okay, and as Hashem, he asked for the Jews in the desert to make the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and he said, "Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socha." Make for me a holy place, and I will rest, or a temple, and I will rest within it. So, and in general, why does Hashem put us on this earth? He puts us on this earth, and he built a world. He wants a place that he can rest in this world. And if we look at text number 2, page 81, it says, this is what the human being is all about. This is the purpose of the human being's creation and of creation of all the worlds, both spiritual and material, that God should have a home in the material world. So Hashem wants that we should make a home for him in this world. So we all people, all human beings are homemakers for Hashem's house, which is the earth. And the purpose behind all that we do in this world is to make a nice and good and comfortable place for him to live. So to make the world from a house into a home. And whatever capacity you find yourself in this world, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, or a business person, whatever it is that you do, or whatever field you work, the goal is the same. To remember that Hashem is in the details and to do what we can to make this a nice and comfortable world for Hashem. Okay, and that's where the mitzvahs come in, because then Hashem says, oh, I want to be comfortable in this world. You need to try and transform all these things that I gave you into holiness, into light. And as we said before, the woman is a transformer. We transform things. We kind of like, so the idea of changing the world over is actually a feminine quality. And think of it this way, when Hashem is fully comfortable in this world, when he feels totally comfortable that it's really his home and everything is kind of got transformed, is like when the times of Mashiach, because when Mashiach will come. We say it will be a feminine world, because usually it's the woman that kind of turns the house into a home, and it's the feminine energy that's going to turn the world into a place for Mashiach, into a place where Hashem is totally, his presence is there in a revealed way, and where he's totally comfortable. Sometimes we need, okay. So there are many mitzvahs surrounding bread. And there's, as I said before, there's also a spiritual type of bread making, and we're going to discuss this a little bit. So the Talmud tells us, as we saw before in the video, there are 39 work prototypes that were used to build the Mishkan, or to serve the Mishkan, in the Mishkan, the tabernacle that was in the desert. And when it came to and everyone was all excited in the desert to start working on it and building this beautiful place for Hashem to be. And when it came to Friday, Hashem said, okay, everybody, listen up. We still have to keep Shabbos. Shabbos comes before building the tabernacle, building this home for me. And so all those jobs that you need to do to build the Mishkan, you can't do on Shabbos. And so on Shabbos, we all stopped from the creating, stopped from the working. And that's how this whole idea of what we do on Shabbos, what we can't do on Shabbos came about. And 11, what we said before, 11 of the 39 all have to do with making the bread. So that's how we know what we don't do on Shabbos, whether it's writing, lighting a fire, drawing, building, bread making, making clothing, and stuff like that. Okay, so as we mentioned before, these are the 11 calls to breaking bread. There's plowing, there's sowing, sorry, there's reaping, binding sheaves, threshing, winnowing, selecting, grinding. I can see the rest of these, 1 second. Sifting, kneading, and baking. Now, we're not going to discuss all of these today, so we'll be here forever. We're going to pick 3 to kind of delve into and understand the more Kabbalistic sense of these things. So baking has to do with, okay, so text number 3, page 83, 6 days you shall work, and the 7th day is Shabbos. This is also a commandment, just as the people of Israel were commanded that the mitzvah of resting on Shabbos, so they were commanded to work the other 6 days of the week. Now listen to that. So yes, we need to work 6 days of the week, and only then is a mitzvah to rest on Shabbos. So resting on Shabbos is you like kind of step back and look at the week that you just finished and what you've accomplished in that week and what you did in that week. So kind of like Shabbos is a day that you kind of stand above and look down and see what you did. And the more you work during the week, the more you appreciate Shabbos. Yeah, anyone ever noticed that? like you're busy, busy, busy running all week, and I'll finally you have Shabbos, and then you just love it. Although a week that you kind of aren't really doing much, you don't appreciate Shabbos in that same way. And so it's a mitzvah to work 6 days, and then a mitzvah to rest on Shabbos. Okay, now back to the significance, deeper significance of things that we can't do on Shabbos. So we're going to look into sewing, selecting, and kneading. Okay, so sewing. The fourth Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shmuel, text number 4, said sewing is like a life as an investment. The soul descent into the body is indeed an enormous descent coming down from a place of glory to become invested within a materialistic physical body and animal soul full of materialistic desires. But this is a descent for the sake of ascent. This is like the growth of a field whereby a plenitude of grain is brought forth by sowing a small amount of grain into the earth. So too it is with us a descent of the soul into the body and the scattering of the people of Israel in the 4 directions of the world. All this is for the sake of growth that sprouts forth in terms of the revelation of godliness. For although the heavens are loftier than the earth, only the earth has a power to make grow a huge abundance of blessing. So what's sowing? You take a seed, right? And you put it into a cold, dark place called the earth, called the ground, and it gets yucky in there, it disintegrates, it kind of falls apart, maybe gets, and only then, once the seed is totally like disintegrated, then it can sprout out and grow something new. Sometimes the blessings in our life only come through a difficult period. You feel like you're in the dark, in the dirt, you're in the cold, and you don't see the light, and you feel like your whole entire self just came apart. You don't even recognize yourself anymore. But sometimes only then does the new growth and something new and something that you didn't know you had before come out. So the same thing with the soul. The soul is up in heaven. It's having a wonderful time. It's basking in God's light. Everything is good there. It doesn't need to do anything. And then Hashem says, okay, time for you to go into the world. And your soul gets hurled down, thrown out of this beautiful warmth of godliness, thrown onto this deep, dark world where you can't see the godliness. Gets put into some body. And then the soul's trying to convince the body to do the right things. And the body doesn't particularly want to do the right things. And on the other hand, once the soul does convince the body to do something, the profit, the yield is great. Wow. I convinced, the soul convinces the body to say a bracha. The soul convinces the body to eat kosher food. The soul convinces the body, to do whatever it is. And then the soul is able to reap the rewards and feel the great profit that it had. In heaven, it couldn't do any of this. But here on earth, it does all these things and it gains great merits for itself and grows so much only by being down here on earth, because the soul can grow in that way up in heaven. In the heaven, the soul can only grows through like people down here on earth saying Kaddish for the soul or doing a mitzvah for the soul and stuff like that. But down here on earth, the soul can do things on its own as long as it gets the body to go in sync with it. So that is sowing. View this or something. Okay, now winnowing. Winnowing is selecting and sifting. It's the choices that we make every day. Okay, so every day we have to make choices, right? We have to choose between good and evil. That's an easier one. Sometimes we have choices that are more subtle. We need to examine an issue and ask advice. Is this the right thing to do or is that the right thing to do? They both seem good or they both seem evil. What's the right thing to do in such a case? Or sometimes you have two very good choices and you need to choose one. So you say, okay, which one better describes my mission here in life? Which one better describes my natural talents and abilities and will help me gain further and grow further in bringing godliness into this world or helping others and stuff like that. So Hashem could just have given us a life without choices like angels. Angels don't really have choice. They just do whatever it is that Hashem wants them to do. And then you just be going through the motions. Okay, you wake up in the morning, you say, honey, you do this, you do that, and you just go whatever it is. But then you don't own it. It's not yours. You're just doing whatever it is Hashem wants. And it's not really you. It's not you don't have an individuality. But by having our own choices, we get to own our own life. And then we find meaning in our life. We're not robots. We're people with, feelings and everything. And so by winnowing, selecting, and sifting, it helps us go through all these things and own our life and be who we are in our most individual self. Like the Lubavitcher Rebbe always spoke to people who had certain talents or certain artistic abilities, to not to shun those abilities, not to shelf them, but to try to serve God by using that art, by using that ability that they had. So winnowing, as we saw before in the video and stuff, that it's separating the chaff and the kernel. Selecting is picking out the smaller little shaftings that didn't go out in the original winnowing, and sifting is sifting through the flour to get the right parts of the right parts of the kernel. If you wanted, white flour or whole wheat flour, how fine you want the flour, and stuff like that. So we choose how, how exactly we want our life to be through winnowing, selecting, and sifting. And we make sure to see what is it that we can do and how we can help people, and do it through that. Exactly what type of what life you want to leave, as long as it's, and in bringing out godliness in that way. Okay. So and now we're gonna go to kneading. Kneading, we can only make a bracha on challah if we have the dough. We don't make a bracha on the flour and put a flour aside for the kohen, but it has to be an actual dough. What's the difference between dough and flour? Anyone ever here use flour to make anything? So when I make my challah every week, the flour just gets all over the place, right? It's a whole bunch of little teeny particles that are just everywhere, and it just gets into everything. I think it's worse. I don't know. It's like one of the hardest things to clean up and to keep clean from, because it just, you even just like, you put the bag of flour down on the table and some flour shoots out, right? Whatever it is, the flour just go anywhere and everything. Dough is one, it might be sticky, but it's one unified substance. You add a little bit of water to the flour and all of a sudden the flour sticks together. So it represents like unity. So flour is a whole bunch of separate particles and makes a huge mess. And dough is one. I'll read text number 5 from the Rebbe, page 86. The purpose of the mitzvah of challah is to elevate our material activities and unite them with godliness. This is represented by the dough, which combines flour and water. Flour is comprised of many particles, disparate specks. The water unites these disparate specks into a single entity. In the spiritual sense, this represents the idea that the material things which are separate and apart, like the disparate specks of flour, are unified by means of the Torah, which is referred to as water. So the world is made of all different fragments and billions of people, and everyone's different, and not just people, but also different creatures. And this is a great recipe for conflict and for chaos. But if we add spirituality into our lives and we add Torah into our lives, we bring this, it helps bring the material, the flour, all together and create a cohesive existence. And then we can exist together and better as one unit, as a flour, and make a delicious bread. And that's why we specifically, we specifically need that dough. We need to knead that dough together to bring us all together, and to take the spirituality of the flour and make it into a cohesive, civilized society. So that's basically the class. If you have your books, there are in the appendix different like things about like what's considered hamotzi and how much dough you need to make a bracha to separate the challah from the dough. So you look at that on your own time. Let's just do the key points. Bread is the most dominant component of the human diet. Historically, it marks the beginning of human civilization. Thus, the term bread often represents food in general, and even more broadly, all human needs. On a deeper level, the predominance of bread in our daily lives reflects its inner spiritual meanings, I think it says. Okay, there are numerous mitzvahs And observances that pertain specifically to bread. These include the Hamoti blessing and grace after meals said before and after eating bread, and their special status as the most primary of the food brachas. The mitzvah of challah, whereby a piece of dough was separated and consecrated to Hashem when baking bread, and the Netilas Yadayim, the ritual washing of the hand before eating bread, which incorporates into our daily lives a feature of the sacred service and the heightened spirituality of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The Talmud lists 39 work prototypes from which we rest on Shabbos. These also define the work we do on the other 6 days of the week, and even more importantly, the purpose and the goal of that work, to make the world a home for God. Heading the list of the 39 work prototypes are 11 steps of what Talmud calls a process of bread making. These 11 activities: plowing, sowing, reaping, binding, sheaving, threshing, winnowing, selecting, grinding, sifting, kneading, and baking, all to describe the primary process of our inner spiritual lives. Sowing is a counterintuitive action, as a useful grain is buried to decompose in the earth, but this investment is rewarded with 100-fold yield. In the same way, the soul's investment in the earthiness of material life yields a divine profit far greater than anything the soul can achieve as a spiritual being. Winnowing, selecting, and sifting represent 3 different kinds of choices we face as we navigate life's challenges. We choose right over wrong, to discern right from wrong, and the difference is not so obvious, and to choose the more advantageous path between the 2 positive options. A distinctive feature of the material world is its fragmentation into many disparate entities, each with its own agenda, striving, and desires. Kneading is the endeavor to infuse the flour particles of our fragmented existence with the binding the water of the spiritual purpose. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Hope you have a great day. And I guess most of you are signed up for the luncheon here, right?
Thank you, sorry.
Happy to see
Happy
you.
birthday, sorry.
Thank you, Suri. Thank
you.
you so much for a
Thank you,
wonderful
Suri.
year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And next class is March 8th, okay? So mark it down.
Fantastic.
Okay.